McCreeper here. I'm gonna start by saying my own story that happened a few months back. If you guys from my old videos remember Doug So Retro, he was heavily involved in this story as well. So I'll play that and then use the shitty text-to-speech. Alright, here we go. So basically what happened was, we don't live in the best neighborhood ever, but we happen to know a lot of people around here, and we're friends with them, and that's how I met Doug. We're neighbors, so yeah. But there's also the fair share of crazy people that live down a cul-de-sac right off of our street. And one of those people, well, we're going to talk about him. It all starts in May of last year, 2016, and I'm basically on a ripstick. If you don't know what that is, just look up Caster skateboard or something like that, up and down the driveway, and I see this guy walking down the footpath. He looked hammered. I didn't really want to be there when he walked past. I'll freely admit it, I was kind of scared of him. So I went inside, and I looked out the window in my front room, just to watch him walk past so I can go outside and keep playing. And he started walking down our driveway. So at this point, I'm freaking out, and I alert my dad. And we search, we close the shed, which was open. And bear in mind, it's actually my brother's birthday on this day. And there was music and people over, and maybe that's what deterred him, but you could hear the music from the street, definitely. So, that was weird. And then later on, various things have gone missing whenever our gate was open. So, one time, I left a bag outside, and the contents of the bag were $150. Like, they were worth $150 plus the bag itself. And apparently, according to Doug, this guy walks down a driveway, picks up the bag, and goes, while I am home. And the way my house is laid out, you got my bedroom, my driveway, and the table that the bag was on. And then I've got a window which looks directly at that table, and the driveway is next to my bedroom. So, and I was talking to my friends. So if I'd had my webcam on, they would have seen him grab the bag and go. But the creepiest thing is when my neighbor tells me a description of the guy. He said, he was wearing really baggy clothes, mohawk, didn't look any older than 30. I'm going, that matches the description of the guy I saw down my driveway. Anyway, we go about our day, and about 3 weeks later, we hear that a guy has crashed on his bike. So Doug and I get out of the house. He's over at my house with my other neighbors for a barbecue. Like I said, it's a really close neighborhood and everyone knows everyone. And we see the guy crashed with a bike, and not yet police, but being pinned down. And police arrived, and apparently he was at a servo. If you guys don't know what a servo is, it is a petrol station, or gas station. And he stole 10 baseball caps and stole someone's bike to get away. And as he was turning into his little cul-de-sac, he hit the curb and smashed his face on the ground. And people were pinning him down. The cops came, arrested him, and we told him about the bag thing, and he's had that added onto his charges. In fact, he's out of jail now, most likely, and still owes me $150. But he's not going to pay that off. He's just going to buy drugs, which, by the way, police found ice in his house. But weirdest thing about it is he was schizophrenic, and the police backed this up, saying, yeah, he's actually schizophrenic, and apparently the voices they taught him to do everything. So that's my little story, and that's obviously not very good, but here's the rest, and I hope you enjoy. This is on Reddit again. I freaking love Reddit. And these are somewhat recent stories. I hope you enjoy. That didn't work. I am terrible at computers. It just... yeah, I freely admit that.
From a health professional.
I am terrible at this. Mock me in the comments all you want. Just cut me some slack. Okay, I'm really, really tired today. No, not really. I'm just really bad. Cut me some slack. Alright, hope you enjoy.
Number 2. I just found this sub and I wanted to share my own experience. It happened when I was 13 and it's something I've never forgotten. We had just moved into a brand new house in a brand new housing development. A lot of the houses around us were either unfinished or had families that had just moved in. Behind our house was a lot of field, mostly for more future houses. We lived in a fairly safe small city and the housing development was very quiet, so for the first few years we lived there we never bothered to lock the doors. Even at night most of the time it just wasn't something we thought about. My parents had just put in hardwood floors, so the house was a pretty echoey single story. One night as I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, I thought I heard the back sliding glass door open. I was up late on the internet, but everyone else was asleep, so the house was quiet. I had my door slightly open so my cat could come and go, and so I knew that Anne was definitely hearing something. I froze, hoping it wasn't the door, but a moment later I heard it slide shut. Then I began to hear what sounded like heavy shoes walking across the hardwood floor. It was a very specific sound, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. The footsteps were slow and quiet. Like they were trying to make as little noise as possible, but because the floor was wood and our house had high ceilings, the steps echoed down the hallway to my room. Then I heard them stop. The sound of the hallway closet being opened, and then the door quietly clicking shut, like they turned the knob, pulled the door closed, and then released the knob once it was in place. It was silent after that. My heart was beating so fast and I began crying. The only way to my parents' room was up the hallway. The door was only about 20 feet away from where the hallway closet was. I was frozen and I honestly thought I would pee my pants. I was so scared. However, it was silent for long enough that I knew I had to get my dad. So I stood up and walked sock-footed to my door. I stood there for a long time breathing. Then I ran. It's not a long hallway, but I went as fast as I could. I got inside the room and tried to wake my dad up. Dad, Dad, I was frantically whispering. He was half asleep. Dad. Who what? Dad, I think there's someone inside the house. What? Get up, I think there's someone inside the house. There's no one in here, go back to sleep. Yes, there is, I start crying. That gets him up. My mom also wakes up at this point as well. So they both get out of bed. My dad, sure there's no one in the house, doesn't even grab something as a weapon. But I follow behind him as he leaves the room. He goes into the living room, passes the closet, turns on all the lights in the house. I remember standing in the living room, knowing exactly where the person was and not being able to say anything. He tells me, look, there's no one. He doesn't check the closet, though. And I don't tell him to. I'm so afraid that whoever is in there will jump out with a knife and kill my dad in front of me, and 13-year-old me keeps thinking I can't be the one responsible for my dad's death. So I say nothing. And I don't tell him to check the closet. I don't know why he didn't, because if I were a dad I would have. He locks the front door and tells me to go back to bed. They wait until I'm back in my room before they close their own bedroom door and go back to sleep. Again, the house is silent and I'm laying there afraid because that person is still in here, in the one place he didn't look. Suddenly I hear the closet door open just as slowly and as quietly as before. Then the footsteps again. I could hear them clearly walking towards the kitchen where the back door is, and they stop. That's followed by the sound of the back door being slid open and then quietly being pushed closed again. I hear the back door click into place. And then the house is silent. I'm laying there crying and breathing, but hearing them leave the house, I felt instant relief, though I was still shaking with fear. I give it a few minutes hoping they wouldn't come back. And they don't. So after a bit I sneak out there. My one and only thought is to lock the back door, which I managed to do, but the scariest part was that when I looked at the hall closet, the door wasn't closed anymore. It was cracked because they hadn't bothered to close it after they left, though I know it was definitely closed when my dad was out there with me. I tried bringing it up to them years later and they still didn't believe me. But that's not something you just hear. Number 3. This happened 6/7 of a year ago when I was around 13 and still in school. Walking home one day, going through town, the weather was unbearable. Not like that nice sunny vibe sort of warmth, but the horrible bastard heat blanket type that suffocates the shit out of you. You know things are bad when the country you live in is so cold that anything above 15 degrees C is memorable. Anyway, I took off some of my school uniform, which consisted of a heavy wool blazer, long-sleeved grey jumper and tie. This was a mandatory outfit living in Ireland and going to a grammar school, heavy ascoats that people been wearing since 1667 when the shit first opened. With just a short-sleeved shirt on, I headed about my merry way when this old man beckoned to me to come over from across the street. He was about 60-70ths from memory, with a little driving cap and leather jacket on. Now, this is something that has landed me in trouble before. I cannot simply turn down a conversation. Regardless of when the local junkies approach, a clear red flag scenarios unfold, I always entertain the fucking thing unintentionally. So I walk over to this dude thinking, hey, maybe he just needs directions. First thing he asked is, do you want some sweets? And offered a Terry's chocolate orange. When I reached out to take a piece, he just held my hand. Like straight up staring into my eyes, held my hand. Rubbing it slowly, he then asked, would you like to come back to my house for a cup of tea? Surely you must be tired and thirsty. Now I know the sensible thing to do here was call for an adult, seeing as there was hundreds around. Belfast is a busy place. There are also police that often patrol the street. All I had to do was shout to make a scene. Instead, what came out of my mouth was, nah dude, that's kinda gay. Without any resistance, I released myself from his grip, took another piece of chocolate orange and walked back over to my bus stop. Looking over my shoulder, he just stared back at me, mouth open, and after a few seconds hurried off around the corner. I realize now that the smart thing to do was to report him, seeing as how this could have happened to anybody else my age and the man could still be out there. This is the first time I have ever told this story, so nobody else knows about it. Although the immediate danger wasn't there, I think the implication warrants a mention. Nevertheless, chocolate orange possible child molester, let's not admit. Number 4. I've stalked this sub for a while and couldn't decide whether or not to post mine, but I'm feeling brave on a Monday. It was a very long time ago, back in 1973. I know it was summer, I was 6, and we were living on Monica Lane in Madison, Wisconsin. Thing is, I sort of recalled it but never put 2 and 2 together until a few months ago when I was talking to my mom, who went into great detail. I was a very gregarious child, outgoing, extroverted, friends with anyone. It was at the time a middle-class neighborhood, and 3 houses down from ours, on the same side of the street, was a huge park. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a salesman, but mom worked second shift at Marietta, while my dad worked days. I rarely had a babysitter, only if they went out for dinner or a movie. But they did go out often, and there were always older kids in the neighborhood to babysit. One sitter who I really liked lived a few blocks or so away and down the street a little bit. Vicky had babysat a few times before that, and it was pretty uneventful. She'd play games with me, under my hair, play dress up, pretty basic stuff. So anyhow, one day I had gone with friends down to the park. I remember there was a ball field at the time, and a sandlot next to the field. My friends wanted to play on the monkey bars, but I wanted to play in the sand. I looked at the sandbox and my babysitter Vicky was standing there. I told my friends I was going down to the sandbox and ran off. We played in the sand, building a castle, and then she asks me if I wanted to go get something cold to drink. It was stifling hot, and I of course said yes. So she takes my hand and we start walking to her place. She starts telling me about her puppies and asking if I want to play with them. Of course I get giddy and now can't wait to get to her house. This was where my memory had stopped, and after my mom told me what happened, the rest of it flooded back. My mother just happened to be talking to my sister and I about some of the places we lived, and we got to Monica Lane. I told her I remembered the park and how big it seemed, and she asks me if I remember being kidnapped. I immediately thought she was kidding, and then the look on her face told me otherwise. She said it was around 5 in the afternoon and one of my friends had come to the door to ask me to come back outside, sure that I had gotten bored and walked back home. When my mom checked the house, she realized I wasn't there, and 7 months pregnant with my sister sprints to the park, screaming my name. After asking several kids if they'd seen me with no clue, she went to the ball field and asked the older boys if they'd seen me. One of the boys, she guessed around 14, said that he'd seen a younger woman playing with a girl that fit in my description in the sand and walk off in a general direction, and that was all he knew. My mom ran across the street to one of the houses and asked to use their phone and called the police. By the time the police got there, my dad had come home and some of the neighbors were trying to help my mom. So there's this search party out looking for me, screaming my name and knocking on doors. The police had gone back to the park to ask the boys if they knew who had been with me and if they knew who she was. Between the boys and the neighbors, they had deduced who it was that had led me off, but I have no idea how, honestly. The police and the entourage go to her home. She lived with her parents, but they weren't home, and knock on the door. She came to the door and told them she hadn't seen me, and the wretch had been home all day. The police asked her to come in, and for some reason she said okay. They went through the house and went to the basement and found me. That's what my mom knew, and then I remembered. It was literally like a floodgate had opened and I started crying. At 6 you sort of trust everyone and should be in our home. I never got a bad feeling from her and my parents didn't either. But when we walked into her house I remember the cold, holy fuck feeling washing over me and getting very worried. I remember starting to cry and saying I wanted to go home over and over. She takes me into her kitchen and gets me a glass of water and a tissue. I hear dogs barking, and next to the kitchen is an open stairway that goes down and where the barking was coming from. She starts trying to cajole me into going downstairs, telling me there's all sorts of toys and games. I reluctantly agree and she grabs my hand to head down the stairs. The dogs are going nuttier and I start screaming. At this point, Vicky is getting fucking bizarre. She's screaming at me to shut the fuck up. If you don't shut up, I will throw you in the cage with the dogs and they will eat you. Shut up, dragging me down the stairs and still screaming. I was scared out of my mind. I remember crying so hard I was hyperventilating, and I'm screaming so hard I'm not making sounds. Vicky then flips a switch and starts being syrupy sweet, trying to calm me down. She tells me that she was just playing a game and tells me she wants to play hide and seek. She must have been relatively skilled at calming me down because the next thing I know I hear knocking on the door upstairs and I wasn't crying. The houses were all the same sort of tract houses that Sears used to sell, not huge but not small, but you could hear everything at any spot in the house. I keep hearing the knocking and she tells me that it's her friends. They're coming to play hide and seek. She convinced me to let her put a piece of masking tape over my mouth so I wouldn't make her sound and lifted me into this big wooden box next to the kennel. She put a big pile of blankets over me and told me to be really quiet so they didn't find me. The whole time the dogs were going batshit, but when she calmed me down, they calmed down too. They still looked incredibly mean, but they were no longer frothing at the mouth, and only slightly growling. Until the knocking started. I remember scrunching in there, confused. Still scared and convinced that the dogs were going to get out and eat me. I was crying again and hyperventilating. I remember taking the tape off my mouth because I couldn't breathe, but remembered I needed to be quiet because I was afraid what she'd do if I screamed. I laid in the red smelly box next to a big bag of dog food, sweating to hell, tears rolling down my face. I sort of pushed the blankets to the side, but only enough so that I could pull them back over me when someone came. I recall thinking about my dad and wondering if he'd come find me. All of a sudden I hear what sounds like adults yelling my name. They come down the stairs and the dogs are going batshit again. Over and over men are yelling my name, and then I hear a man say, "If you don't shut those fucking dogs up, I will." I was in a large storage box, like a carpenter's toolbox type of thing, with tape hanging off my mouth when they opened the lid. I remember a very nice man asking me my name and if I was okay. I don't remember answering him in anything other than screams and tears and grabbing his neck so hard my dad had to practically pry me off of him. I remember my parents taking me to the hospital to be checked out, and that's all I really remember. Mom said that Vicky was found guilty of attempted kidnapping, and last she knew was in prison, but couldn't remember when the last time was she had heard anything. We moved from the area shortly thereafter, and I haven't been back since. I do know that Mom said that her parents were, but that they didn't know them. She had met Vicky from neighbors that had used her as a babysitter and had never heard of anything bad, and that I always seemed happy with her. She lived in the general neighborhood, but it would have been 2 blocks over and on block down. Mom said they never picked her up, she always walked over. When they'd get home, they'd drive her home, but never noticed anything out of the ordinary. Mom and Dad had only met her parents when they came to the door to ask for forgiveness, that Vicky hadn't meant to do anything bad and was a good girl. Mom said my dad picked up her dad by the shirt and told him that if they ever came on our property again, he'd kill them. I remember her name and sort of what she looked like, but would have no idea if she walked up to me who she is. TL Doctor. I was kidnapped as a child, found within a few hours, and had completely blocked the memory. Edit, because I think the dog breed is important, especially when you see it through a 6-year-old's eyes. They were huge Rottweilers, and to a child it seemed like hellhounds. Number 5. This is a story that I was told by my mother when I was old enough to understand what had almost happened. I was only a few weeks old, and in those days when a mother had given birth and taken the baby home, midwives were sent from the hospital to check on the baby and mother once or twice a week max. My dad was working, so he wasn't home, and my mother had put me to sleep and was going about her business in the house. These visits were only every week or so, and she had just had 2 midwives come the morning one day before, so knew immediately what happened next wasn't okay. She had a knock at the door, and so went to open the door. We lived in a close-knit community. There was rarely any threat to safety around there, but most of the people who lived by worked the whole day, as they were young, healthy couples. So it was deserted at the time of day. My mother was greeted by a male and female who were dressed in midwifery outfits with hospital badges and a very polite welcome, asking if they could come in. They explained they had been sent by the hospital to check on her and the new baby. My mum let them in as they had all the professional clothes and badges and knew when my mother had given birth, etc. They even knew she had a little girl and my mother's name, very convincing, but also all info that is easy to access. The male said he was going to take me upstairs and check over me, and the female would check over my mother downstairs. However, my mother didn't feel okay about them wanting to separate us, and she explained that a pair of midwives had already been that week and said that she was going to ring the hospital to check us knob. Odie had notified her that some more were coming just a day or 2 after. She also said she warned them that her husband, my dad, was on his way home from work and wouldn't be happy about this. At this point, the pair got very defensive and said that they would leave after being really pushy with my mother to separate the 2 of us. Finally, she got the pair to leave, who quickly changed the behavior to being calmed down and said not to worry, it must have been a mistake, and not to bother checking with the hospital when my mum was trying to contact the hospital. What was even weirder is that when my mum opened the door making them leave, there was another person waiting in a car outside, probably the getaway driver, who had the engine still running. When they left, my mother, scared, rang the hospital, who said they had not had any midwives scheduled to visit me and my mother, and that they always alert the mother if they are going to send midwives. They also said they would never ask to separate the mother and baby. They asked for descriptions of the midwives and said that they didn't have a male midwife at the hospital where I was born and to contact the police. Terrified, my mother called my dad, who came straight home, and they reported it to the police, who took a description but never amounted to anything that we know of. Who knows what those pair were planning? It's so creepy that they had gained access to all the information that my mother had recently given birth. They must have been watching the house to know my father wasn't home. They had even gone to the effort of having the uniform and badges made. Thank God my mother acted on her instinct and got them the hell out of the house and stuck to her guns. It's even more creepy to imagine what my life would be now if they had got to carry out what they were planning. I don't believe it could have been a genuine mix-up. They had not followed standard protocol in warning my mother they were visiting. They were very insistent on separating the two of us, and they were rude and defensive when my mother challenged them, which is not acceptable behavior from a health professional. I believe we were very lucky that they left without a fuss eventually. I hope I have never and will never meet those pair again, or any creepy impersonators with God knows what agenda behind them. And I hope they didn't go on to do this to any other new and vulnerable mothers.
So that's the video. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Okay, bye.